Here's University of Washington professor David Armstrong lecturing for the Broadway Maven about Black Broadway during the Jazz Age.
The four creators of Shuffle Along were all talented and accomplished Black headliners from mainstream vaudeville. So these are stars of white vaudeville, not just Black vaudeville. And the show's book was written by the comedy team of Miller and Lyles. Flournoy Miller and Aubrey Lyles were both born in Tennessee in the mid-1880s, and they met while attending Fisk University. Their act consisted of songs, jokes, and physical humor, and included a sketch called The Mayor of Dixie that they thought could be expanded into a full-length musical comedy. The show's score was created by Noble Sissle and Eubie Blake. Sissle was born in Indianapolis in 1889 and began singing in his high school glee club. He dropped out of college to join James Reese Europe's Society Orchestra, and during World War I, he played under Europe's leadership in the regimental band of the all-black 369th Infantry Regiment, famously known as the Harlem Hellfighters. That deserves a whole book on its own, the story of James Reese Europe's Society Orchestra, and probably a Netflix miniseries. It's a fascinating story. I highly recommend you looking into it. James Hubert Eubie Blake was born in Baltimore in 1887, and before emancipation, both of his parents had been enslaved. Eubie began exhibiting extraordinary piano skills at the age of 6, and by the age of 12, he'd already composed the Charleston Rag and other ragtime tunes, all to the great disapproval of his mother, who did not want to have the devil's music in her house. Eubie's professional career began as a piano player at the summer resort of Atlantic City, New Jersey, where he interacted with both George M. Cohan and Irving Berlin, who admired his piano playing, and he began this relationship with the two of them there. It was around this time that Blake met Noble Sissle, and they wrote their first songs together. And from there, Blake moved to New York, where he briefly took over leadership of the Society Orchestra after James Reese Europe's tragic death. Eventually, Sissle and Blake teamed up to form their own very classy vaudeville act called the Dixie Duo, although neither of them were really from the South. And instead of appearing in blackface and wearing comically garish or tattered costumes, as was still the common practice for most Black vaudeville performers, including Miller and Lyles, Sissle and Blake strode onto the stage sporting elegant tuxedos, their natural skin tones, with Blake taking a seat at a sleek grand piano as the duo launched into a selection of popular hit tunes of the day, nostalgic ballads, and new original songs with music by Eubie Blake and Noble Sissle. Let's take a little bit. The sound on this video is not very good, but it gives you a sense of this is a little soundy movie of their vaudeville act, as you would have seen it and also as you would have seen it in Shuffle Along, which we'll hear about in just a couple of minutes.
I'm fixing this Dan, I'm fixing this Dan. He does that thing called loving like no one else can. He's got such a pleasing line of talk and a way of speaking that no one can mock. And his eyes, they hypnotize you, just hypnotize, just mesmerize you, and all he's a kissing man. What am that man? About the thing he does that sets the girl is crazy. It's when he holds them in his arms and calls them baby. Lord, goodness land, there's no other man. I like that loving daddy, affectionate dad. I'll mean that of affectionate dad, affectionate dad. He does that thing for loving like no one else can. He's got that just amazing line of talk and a way of being that no one can mock. And his eyes just hypnotize you, just hypnotize, mesmerize you, and all he's a kissless man. What is that word from Dan? But the thing he
Okay,
does
let's
because
get
the
out of
girl
that
is
now.
ringing. It's when he
In 1921, Miller and Lyles shared a bill with Sissel and Blake at a fundraising performance for the NAACP, and they were greatly impressed by the songs. Miller and Lyles were impressed by Sissel and Blake's songs and approached them about joining forces to create a musical for Broadway. It had been over a decade since a black show had been on Broadway. But as described by Cassine Gaines in his book When Broadway Was Black, the four men were aware of the long odds, but thought that if anyone could bring black folks back to Broadway, they were the ones. The comedians already had the skeleton of a story. The musicians had a dozen songs they could work into a narrative. With nothing but a handshake agreement in place, the quartet agreed to give it a shot. The plan was that Miller and Lyles would expand their comic skit, The Mayor of Dixie, into a two-act book about a mayoral, how you say that, election for mayor in the fictional black community in South Carolina, which was dubbed Jimtown. That was the name of the town, and remember that because that's going to come up again. Sissel and Blake would provide the score made up of surefire hits from their vaudeville act, along with new songs, especially written for this story. Sissel, Miller, and Lyles would all play leading roles, and Blake would conduct the orchestra, and near the end of the show, when the show's thin plot had all been wrapped up, Blake would join Sissel on stage to perform a segment of their vaudeville act billed as A Few Minutes with Sissel and Blake. You just saw A Few Minutes with Sissel and Blake, and that's probably what it would have looked like, whether they performed that song. But I think every night they did different songs, or they often did different songs, to inspire people to come back and see the show multiple times. As might be expected, this quartet of black performers who had never appeared in or written a show for Broadway before had tremendous difficulty finding a backer who would supply the necessary financing. They finally persuaded white producer John Court to provide the show with an out-of-town tryout. Following this very chaotic and severely underfinanced pre-Broadway tour, on May 22nd, 1921, Shuffle Along limped into New York, $21,000 in the hole. That's be equivalent to about $300,000 today. The only theater that the show could obtain was a rarely used, run-down old lecture hall on West 63rd Street, more than 10 blocks north of the theater district. Nevertheless, with all of this stacked against it, Shuffle Along opened there on May 22nd, 1921, and against all odds became a massive hit. In fact, after only a few weeks of performances, the street in front of the theater had to be changed to one way to prevent the crowds arriving at the show from bringing traffic in the neighborhood to a complete standstill. The show attracted a large, diverse, multiracial audience who, to an unprecedented degree, were seated side by side in unsegregated seating. The white stars, cast members, and creative teams of other Broadway shows were all so eager to see Shuffle Along that a midnight matinee, actually 11:30 p.m., was instituted on Wednesday nights to accommodate them. And also a lot of black audiences, people who had to work at various times, took advantage of this. Was their chance to see the show when they couldn't come because they worked nights. They were in all different kinds of jobs. Irving Berlin saw the show many times, often sitting front row center so he could cheer on U.B. Blake, who stood directly in front of him conducting the orchestra. And he would often lean over and whisper things to U.B. Blake and tell Sissel, that lyric's fantastic, and stuff like that. And there's no doubt that George and Ira Gershwin, Rodgers and Hart, Vincent Youmans, Dorothy Fields, Cole Porter, and Noel Coward, and virtually every other songwriter of the day were influenced by Sissel and Blake's eclectic score. The show's biggest hit was the infectiously syncopated I'm Just Wild About Harry, but it didn't start out being infectiously syncopated. The story goes that Blake, who was a great admirer of Victor Herbert's music, had composed a waltz for the show in Herbert's signature style. And you can also you can imagine it, da 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 ba, da 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 da. Pardon my singing. But during rehearsals, it was decided that the waltz might not be the right fit for the show. So rather than throw out a great melody, Blake transformed the song's original 3/4 time signature into a jaunty 2/4 rhythm. And for more than a century, Harry has been performed and recorded countless times, used in dozens of films and television shows, and perhaps most notably enjoyed a major resurgence in 1948 when it was used as the official campaign song of Harry S. Truman during his successful run for president. Shuffle-Along's acclaimed dancing also had a tremendous impact on Broadway. Ziegfeld's rival George White, and also Ziegfeld and other producers soon hired Shuffle-Along's dancers and choreographers to teach their white stars and chorus dancers how to move like that. Furthermore, Shuffle-Along's large cast introduced many talented performers who would become major stars, including Adelaide Hall, Florence Mills, Paul Robeson, and Josephine Baker. Josephine Baker starts off in the chorus of Shuffle Along. Perhaps most significantly and importantly, Shuffle Along's immense financial success demonstrated that both white and black audiences were eager to see talented African American performers on stage in black authored shows and would pay top ticket prices to see them. During its nearly 14-month run, 504 performances, Shuffle Along grossed an estimated $1.5 million, which is the equivalent of over $26 million today. As a result of this achievement and the lyrics to the show's title song, and as the lyrics to the show's title song had recommended, Broadway did indeed just keep shuffling along. Over the following decade, at least 24 musicals written by and starring black theater artists would open on Broadway. And as author Cassine Gaines has noted, there were more black folks working on Broadway in 1924 than there are today.
Don't forget to like and subscribe. Shalom, I'm David Benkof, the Broadway Maven. The Broadway Maven is a vibrant educational community. Every month, members may attend 5 to 15 classes and other expert-led Broadway experiences, all for just $18. There's a membership link in the description. And here's a playlist of videos by David Armstrong.